This is the poet and the poem from the Library of Congress. We're on location. We are happy to present a new book by Alfred Bennett Spellman Jr., known internationally as the beloved poet, jazz scholar A.B. Spellman. Give us a poem, A.B.
All right, this is a poem from the early 60s when I was finally starting to get it together as a poet. It's called The Twist. A dancer's world is walls, movement confined, music, God's last breath,
Mm,
rhythm, the last beating of his heart. A dancer follows that sound toward walls with others. She cannot dance alone.
mm.
She thinks of thought as wisdom. She thinks of thought as windows, as ice around the dance. Can you break it? Move.
That's A.B. Spellman. Is that from the Beautiful Days?
It is, it is, it is,
Do
it
you know I
is.
had that book?
And you don't have it anymore?
No, I don't. I think it's at the GW, maybe the collection, special collection. But I was very much into Diane de Prima at that time.
Oh, wonderful poet and wonderful person.
Well, this is A.B. Spellman, and tell us the title of this new book out from Wesleyan.
Mm. It's called Between the Night and Its Music.
Beautiful title.
Yes,
Beautiful title.
it's
What's in it?
it's new and selected poems. So that poem that I just read, the twist there's a cluster of poems from that time. My editor loved those poems much more than I did because it was, my goodness, so long ago, and I don't even remember the person I was then. But I guess some of them hold up pretty well, so she picked them. And then there are some poems, a cluster of uncollected poems, poems that hadn't appeared in any collections before. And then there are poems from the Black Arts period and poems from the collection before, which was called Things I Must Have Known. That was out from
Mm.
Coffee House Press. I know you have that. And finally, there are the newer poems. And I'm very happy about the book. It's a wonderful book. It's a
It's
beautiful
a
book.
gorgeous book. It's your
And
soul is in this book. Your
yeah, I guess so.
soul. But you are not a good judge. Poets really are not very good judges of their own work because your original poems are as good as your new poems.
You
And
think so?
I must have read 10 million poems in my life. So I know that your original poems are just as good as your new poems, which is so strange that you would not know that.
Mm.
That's very
No,
interesting. I don't think we can be the total judges of our own work. So let us hear another poem and tell us which section it is from.
well, this poem is it comes it's among the uncollected poems, and I wrote it in 1968 after I just moved to Atlanta, and I
Mm,
met my wife Karen, a very great woman. She was in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC.
mm,
Uh, so this poem is from that SNCC era, and it's sort of these were people who went into the deepest, darkest, most vicious areas of Jim Crow,
mm,
registered people to vote in counties where no black person had ever voted in the entire history of the county. I mean, not one had ever voted in, say, Lowndes County, Mississippi. And so a lot of that kind of imagery is in there. I should give a couple of glosses here. I mentioned Orangeburg, that's Orangeburg, South Carolina. You know, and many people know that the horrible events that occurred at Kent State when state troopers went up on campus and killed some students involved in peaceful demonstration. Well, that happened several times on historically black campuses as well. And Orangeburg is the home of Voorhees State College, where students again had gone down and protested segregation, and the state troopers came to the campus and killed numerous of them. So that is a reference. I mentioned Cheney, Schwerner, and Goodman. They were three Corps workers who were assassinated in Philadelphia, outside Philadelphia, Mississippi. in the late 1960s, and their bodies were thrown away in different parts of the Mississippi River. And there's this massive search to find their bodies, which I know you will recall, Grace. And so that is mentioned. And then there's some names given of some various SNCC workers who I was riding in a car with. All right. When Black people are with each other, we sometimes fear ourselves and whisper over our shoulders about unmentionable acts, and sometimes we fight and lie. These are some things we sometimes do. And when alone, I sometimes walk from wall to wall, fighting visions of white men fighting me, and Black men fighting white men and fighting me. And I lose myself between walls and ricocheting shots, and can't say for certain who I have killed or been killed by. It is the fear of winter passing and summer coming, and the killing I have called for coming to my door, saying, "Hit it, AB, you're in it too." And the white army moves like thieves in the night, mass producing beautiful Black corpses and then stealing them away, while my frequent death watches me from Orangeburg on Cronkite, and I'm oiling my gun and cooking my food and saying, "When the time comes," to myself over and over, hopefully.
Mm.
But I remember driving from Atlanta to Birmingham with Stone and Featherstone and Cleve. And Feather talked about dueling a pair of Klansmen. And Cleve told how they hunted Cheney, Schwerner, and Goodman's bodies in the haunted hours of the Silver Nights in the Mississippi swamp, while a runaway survivor from Orangeburg slept between wars on the back seat. Times like this are times when Black people are with each other, and the strength flows back and forth between us like borrowed breath. So that is a point from, I guess, what the period that where the Black Arts Movement was at
Mm.
its
You know,
height.
I was surprised there were so many uncollected poems.
Oh,
Really? I'm so glad this book came out because I didn't realize you had that many that were unpublished of winter passing and summer coming. These are beautiful. The way you manage to put lyricism into brutality makes this a complete work of art. Now, the Black Arts Movement, four little words that sound like a federally funded monolith. But tell us about what it really was, city to city, town to town, community, what the Black Arts Movement really was, and how Amira Baraka was involved with it, as well as you.
well, Amiri Baraka was sort of the patriarch of the movement. He made a very courageous and bold decision to give up his career as a rising playwright, which was about to have him made this generation's nominal African American person who was
Mhm.
successful in a discipline.
Right.
It seemed like every generation they would let one through per discipline. You know,
Yeah,
one painter.
I taught his plays in the 70s.
Oh yes,
And I knew him when he was Leroy Jones.
yes, yes. Well, we were schoolmates together at Howard University,
Right.
and I followed him to New York when he moved up there. Um, but at any rate, when he left and went to Harlem, it was a strong statement of commitment because after all, there was this huge political movement in the streets, a movement for social reform, social and political reform. It was all over the South. I mentioned the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee and all the other civil rights organizations, and it was very strong in the North. And then there was Malcolm X, who was a new and very powerful voice, who was really resonating in those years among all the Black intellectuals and Black and people in general, as well as a lot of white activists as well were responding to his call. So it was a time when if you had a conscience, you had to be involved with this great movement. You had to do it, and the question was, how do you do it as artists? And so, what Baraka led us all to do
Mm.
was to go into the communities, commit to them. I did this in Atlanta. He did it in New York. And he was really the thing is none of us knew what to do. None of us had started organizations. We were poets, and now all of a sudden we're trying to start cultural centers, and so there was all that. And I have to mention that I actually view the Black Arts Movement as a continuum from the Harlem Renaissance,
Mm,
because the same things that went on in the Black Arts Movement went on in the Harlem Renaissance, only there was a lot more of it in the 1960s. Um, so that um, it was a period when also there were new funds available for kinds of arts organizations that had not been funded before. Before this time, the all the money went to big institutions, but now all of a sudden, and this I won't get into all of that. There was money available, some from the War on Poverty, which you will remember,
I do.
Johnson great program. Uh,
Mm.
there was money available to have organizations,
What
and
did you do in Atlanta?
well, I started something called the Atlanta Center for Black Art.
Oh, no
Yeah,
small thing.
yeah, and that ran for several years, and
How important is it to put roots down in the arts, to institutionalize it? How important is it to give it a platform?
it is everything, because the assumption had always been that art was an aspect of the cultural life of the castle and not of the village. In other
Mm,
words, it was the art of was for the nobility, and was for the upper class, and that was what culture meant.
right.
That was having culture, was having access to great masterpieces. But the
Mm.
thing is that everyone has culture and everyone has art, but not many communities have always been able to have facilities and centers which can house the art and propagate it and move it forward and
Yeah.
move it from generation to generation. And that's what the Black arts movements and the African and the Latino arts movement and the Asian arts movement, the rural arts movement. There were all these movements, the women's arts movement, the gay and lesbian arts movement. All of these movements went into play, and people got very, very active and started new things, and it's wonderful.
And I will later on, we'll tell them how you made a continuum of that your whole life of service. And A.B. Spellman is an American poet, music critic, and arts administrator. We know him as a leading figure in the Black arts movement, which was 60s and 70s. We call it the Cultural Revolution, but it was a literary movement that emphasized Black identity, pride, and artistic expression. And A.B. was instrumental in that for his whole life. And now, please give us another poem.
All right. This is a poem called Oriki, and Oriki is a service that that is performed for a newborn in the Yoruba culture of Nigeria. So the first thing that a newborn child hears is the voice of the village. It would be a griot in Senegal or somewhere, but it's the equivalent. The village is the tribal historian who is there to tell the child what its history was, what its ancestry was, and give it its secret name, its name of power. And the form, however, is Celtic. I got it from the Scots poet Kathleen Raine. It's a form where it's iambic octameter, which people don't need to know, but it you have to take a word or an image from one line and then repeat it in the next line, and then take one from that line and repeat it in the next line, and it gives you a nice kind of a propulsion. It's a poem that I wrote for my younger daughter, who was very jealous because her older sister had a poem and she didn't. And you know how parenting is.
What motivates poets?
Yeah, yeah. Into your ear I sing a name, and from that name there runs a line, and on that run ancestors chant, the elders dance, they build to you. From their mantra, a rose exhales a summer scent to cover you. Within you, there uncoils the line, woman to man, to first made child, to horizons beyond my sight, where settling light enwraps the cold. And in that light, two hungry souls combine to dream you a name. And in their dream, their love makes you. Then from you there combusts a shout. Around that shout there turns a ring. A stomp propounds a jubilee. In jubilee, the ancients teach, a people rise, a people fall. We fall and rise, and each new hand will sculpt the shape of all the world. You have that force. It fires your smile. It fires your fury. Fires the song I sing to you. That you can be is miracle enough for me.
Any child whose father would write that would wind up being a very powerful person.
Yeah,
Is
yeah.
she the musician?
No, she turned out to be a minister.
Whoa.
Yeah, now
Well,
I'm an atheist. How I raised a
that,
minister, I do not know, but I did, and I'm very proud of her.
because it's all love.
Yeah, yeah.
And I want everyone to know that Between the Tonight and Its Music is a physically beautiful book. Wesleyan did a gorgeous job, and it has all your early work, three of your previous books on collected poems, and new works.
I
And
have to shout out to my editor, Lori Shire. This is a woman who has really shown me great
mm,
devotion and
oh,
respect and who has great love for my work and has done everything in the world she can to put it forward.
and
I
did
have,
she write that terrific preface?
yes, she did.
Well, it's a work of art.
Yeah, yeah, she's
Yeah,
good. She's very good.
she must
She
have
has
really,
many, you
she
know her.
really
She has
believed in
many
you.
anthologies that I'm sure you've seen.
Well, there's a lot of personal belief in you in that book, and I recommend it as the book of the year. So let us skip for a minute into the new poems. Your father was a painter, and is that where you got the love of art?
Yes, I guess I suppose so. I grew up in a town, Elizabeth City, North Carolina, which had no art at all in it. There was no art organizations, no theater, no music, only popular and country music, and so it was hard to come by art. But my father was an untrained painter, an untrained
Wow.
visual artist, and people used to bring their children by for him to do portraits of them because people didn't have everybody didn't have cameras in those days.
Mm, mm,
So they wanted pictures. They'd come to Alfred, and he'd make them a picture.
So you have a little bit of art in your DNA, and
Yeah.
what got a hold of you some kind of way to love Van Gogh enough to write a suite of poems? What
Who doesn't
triggered
love
this?
Van Gogh? Van Gogh, I think, is probably the most popular artist in the world, and that's certainly well deserved. He's such a powerful artist, and he did it against all the time, all the trends, even the trends of his peers of the Impressionists. Van Gogh was the art creator of Expressionism. His work was expressive. He wanted his strokes to be powerful. So it was an art that had not been seen before, and that still seems so very new to us all. Um, and such a power in creation and of conception and perception. I can't get enough of Van Gogh. I never will.
Huh. Well, I don't know anything that exists like this suite of poems about him, which is very comprehensive, even to after his death. So just choose a little section of it, no matter where it is, set it up, and let us enjoy it.
Okay. Well, Van Gogh lived a very hard life, and he died from a gunshot wound. And know who fired the gun has never been determined. He also has suffered a great deal from infection from venereal diseases, and that was which was very prominent in France at the time, in Paris especially. And his brother, who was an art dealer and helped him a great deal, also died from venereal diseases, from syphilis. Um, so this is a poem where I imagine Van Gogh writing to his brother from the grave, and it's called Vincent Writes to Theo from Grave to Grave. Dear Theo, now that you have joined me at Pilgrim's Inn, for love of you, I surrender the privilege of silence. That is the sole reward of death. I do wish you had chosen a passage better than mine to this boring piece, not the way of the pox that twists the brain and corrupts its force, so you stagger blind, awake or in dreams, through a war where all combatants are you. I never knew how to live, so how could I have known how to die? But I wanted a sweeter death for you, little brother. Who shot me? Does it matter? That odious bully Rene Secretan, who put salt in my coffee and snakes in my paint box, whom I called the terror of the smoked herring, and who called me the faithful lover of the widow wrist after he caught me masturbating in the woods? No, he tormented me because I was never mad enough for him. Making me dead would cost him a victim. Did I shoot myself behind the dung heap as some have written, in the stomach, at a distance?
Mm.
Theo, you know how dishonorable I think suicide to be, and that I would never do it by the vulgar gun. If I had to, I would drown myself with elegance, with lilies near and florid Japanese silks about my person. They tell me here that death below the waves can be ecstatic. No, it does not matter who shot me, Theo. It matters that I did not shoot myself. I think of poor pox like us Franz Schubert, snubbed all the way to the crypt in poor and queer hating Vienna, that all my sorry years condense into his terminal sonata, and I am the pilgrim of that first movement who settles in the air and guides the hopeful theme as it searches the global borders of E flat major for a foot to stand upon until all dissonance is fallen out of the key and the questing air must swing back unto itself if it will have purchase. That the beginning is the resolution every time. Theo, I have lived that theme. Little brother, we began in the love of the true. We were the ictus and rebound that christens the new, the tension and release that gives soul to the image. But, dear Theo, not even in the grave do we resolve, and that, if I am true, is the best of us.
Mm. You know, what struck me as I read it was the passion and the investment in the writing. It wasn't just reportage, it just wasn't telling his life. What you have put into that, your very being. So, how do you explain that obsession with him? How do you explain the power you found in yourself to write about him? This is this is not just a piece of writing. This is a piece of you. I mean,
Huh.
such a piece of passion, such belief. Tell me about how you began this and how you organized it.
Well, uh, in my last years, I have found myself unable to rely upon poems to come to me. I have to go and find them. And so often I read books and in the hope that there will be poems in them for me. And so I read a very good biography on Van Gogh by Stephen Niafe, and I forget the co-author's name. And I did indeed find a number of poems. And I also read Van Gogh's letters to his brother.
Perfect.
Those are great letters. I mean, I recommend them to anybody. There's
Mm.
so much what, so much bottom to it, to
Mm.
those
That's a
letters.
good way to put it. So much bottom to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is a lesson to poets. You can't just read poetry. You really have to read science. You have to read history. You have to read letters. You have to read everything.
You
And
do.
I believe this is going to be extremely well noted, this suite on Van Gogh. I don't know anything that exists like it. It really
Huh.
is encapsulizes his life.
Yeah.
But
Well,
it's,
it was a full life, but it was a horrible, painful life
oh,
too. There's not a lot of joy in Van Gogh's life.
mm-mm, mm-mm,
There's a lot of searching of himself, which I think is a shows up in the poems that he's always looking into himself to try to find the way, the real way of doing things, of seeing things, and of representing things in his work. Always searching on it. And he was a very analytical man, a very critical man as well.
mm, mm. Yes, you learned a lot you didn't know from his letters, I guess. A
Oh
lot,
yes,
a
indeed.
lot of secrets.
Yeah.
Well, are there many poets who are jazz scholars?
Well, Baraka was a very, very good jazz writer, an outstanding writer, and he got me into it. In fact, um,
Did he know jazz as you know jazz?
Baraka, yes, indeed.
Oh,
Uh,
really?
yeah, his book Blues People
Oh,
is
that's
essential.
right. That's
It's
right.
essential, very
Well,
definitely.
if there were a crossword puzzle, though, that right now that said, what poet is a jazz scholar? There's only one name that would come up, and that's A.P. Spellman. So tell us, what is a jazz scholar?
I don't consider myself a scholar.
Oh,
I don't do the kind of detail. I mean, I know some scholars, and I'm not one of them. The kind of detailed original research that they do, I do not do. I knew a lot of jazz musicians. I learned a lot from them. They
mm,
taught me how to write about it.
mm.
And
Books and lectures. I think you even had a program on WBAI.
yeah.
So I guess over the years, if you accumulate enough product, that certainly qualifies you as one of America's top jazz scholars. And I think that jazz and poetry have something in common. What do you think it is?
Well, there's first of all the arts have things in common. And secondly, there is something about jazz, the fact that jazz is improvisational, that like as all music, it exists, it exists in time in a way that poetry does not. Makes poets very, very envious of jazz musicians,
Mm,
because the poem is without time, especially the poem for the written page. Now, people who do only performance poetry do not have the same issue. But for those of us who write primarily for the page, time is not so much an element for us. Um,
oh, that's an interesting difference.
yeah, and the sensuality of poetry is its own thing. The sensuality of jazz is its own thing, and it is the act of blowing, which of actually making the music in time that makes jazz
Mm, mm,
such a
mm,
wonderful form.
mm.
Poetry, of course, is more reflective. I think most of the poets I know who love jazz would rather be musicians.
Ah, that's,
uh,
I agree. I
yeah,
agree. Well, let
but
us have another poem before we continue
all
with
right.
giving you a little test.
This is a poem that is based in jazz. It's called Groovin' Low. It's the jazz lovers out there will recognize the title as a play on a Dizzy Gillespie bebop tune called Groovin' High. But
Mm.
whatever groove Dizzy was talking about, this is about aging. And I should tell the excuse me, I should tell the listeners that the weird words in the second stanza I did not make up. They are drum patterns. Okay, Groovin' Low. My swing is more mellow these days. Not the hard bop drive I used to roll, but more of a cool foxtrot. My eyes still close when the rhythm locks. I've learned to boogie with my feet on the floor. I'm still moving, still grooving, still falling in love. I bop to the bass line now. The trap set paradiddles, rattlemacus, and flams that used to spin me in place still set me off. But I bop to the bass line now. I enter the tune from the bottom up and let trumpet and sax wheel above me. So, don't look for me in the treble. Don't look for me in the fly staccato splatter of the hot young horn. No, you'll find me in the nuance, hanging out in inflection and slur. I'm the one executing the half bent dip and the slow, slow drag with the smug little smile and the really cool shades.
Oh, I love that so much. That's going to be my theme song. That is just wonderful. The
Yeah.
first I knew of you, I came to DC in 66, you came in 75. But the first thing I knew about you was that you wrote a book on Ornette Coleman. Now, was that one of several musicians or was that a single book on Ornette Coleman?
There were four musicians there:
Yeah,
Ornette
okay.
Coleman, Cecil Taylor, Jackie McLean, and Herbie Nichols. The original title was Four Lives in the Bebop Business. That title confused a lot of people. So
What
in the
year was
later,
that? What year?
1960, 1965, I believe.
Okay.
And the book has stayed in print almost all the time since then, under different titles. Though its current title is Four Jazz Lives, and it's available from University of Michigan Press. Yeah,
Well, that is, I think you really made your debut with that one, right?
yeah,
And that
yeah.
was, how long did that take to write?
Uh, it took me about a year and a half to write it. A lot of interviews,
Yeah.
and a lot of other work
It
that
made
goes
a big
there.
sound when it came out.
It got a
It
good response. I
it
don't know
really
why I'm
did.
not rich though, because the number of people who tell me they've read the book.
I wonder about that. I'm thinking Amazon takes the profits. I do. Well,
Yeah.
you came and do you remember when in DC when jazz was like DC was the jazz capital? We had so many venues and now not so much. How do you explain that?
Well, it's national, if not international, phenomenon. The jazz nightclub has basically died around all over the country. There will be one or two in the major cities. But when I first moved to Washington, moved back to Washington in 1978, this area that I live in now, Brookland, had had three or four jazz clubs in it. You know,
Oh,
and
there's so many in Washington. We had the Blues Alley, we had Child Harold, we
uh,
had I forget what it's called, but down by the river. But
but now this all gone except for Blues Alley.
I know, but I don't understand why.
A couple of well, it's well, the economy of it just didn't seem to work. The there were a lot of costs that first of all, musicians, the
Oh,
really good musicians are expensive to maintain and to hire, and you have to price your admissions so high that a lot of people don't want to come. Besides which, you have the usual competition that exists in the arts with television and with streaming.
oh, there you go.
You know,
There you go.
so people just aren't going out the same way they used to,
Streaming.
going out
Yep.
for an evening of music in the same
Mhm.
way. So you have symphony orchestras doing things like having concerts where they play the music scores and show to movies and show the movies as they play the scores. They're having to resort to things that they would never have done 15 years ago.
Well, we both lived in DC during the Cultural Revolution, and it was a very rich time. It still is. Let's have another poem, and then I want to talk about your contribution.
All right. Let's see. Uh, what shall I do? All right. How about a funny poem? You ready? Want some humor? This. Hey, you there?
Oh,
Oh, yeah. Okay. I
I'm
thought you said something I didn't
at
hear.
your beck and call.
Okay. This poem is dedicated to all my friends who've written tell-all memoirs, something an imperative I absolutely do not understand.
You don't want to tell your secrets.
I'm not telling. No, so this is called "The Women I Have Not Slept With."
Oh, I love it.
Yeah. All right. They number in the billions, and that's if I only count the living. For example, I have not slept with Sarah Palin, and not because she shoots large mammals for fun. No, I've not slept with her because she's too far right and I'm too far left, and that's too much miscegenation to arouse. Nor have I slept with Hillary Clinton. I had a shot at Hillary and have the photograph to prove it. That's me shaking hands with her, head cocked to the side, a mating signal in every primate male. And I thought I saw something in the curl of her mouth. But the crowd was pushing at my back there in the gold room, and I couldn't make my move. But we'll see. We'll see. Before you get the impression that I've only not slept with white women, I haven't slept with Oprah either. No fault of hers, no fault of mine. We just never hooked up. Never made it with Vanessa Williams, and that one hurts. She once split from a sexual fantasy I was having, took one look at my admittedly adipose body and disappeared from my fantasy and wouldn't come back. Broke my tumescent heart. And then there's Shaka Khan. Sweet, sweet, sweet Shaka, the lust of my life. I did get to hug her once, a nice belly to belly rub, but my boss was in the room and nothing came of it. She sent me a box of chocolates. And so it goes, or it doesn't. If I haven't slept with you and didn't mention you, please don't be offended. I thought you deserved your own poem.
Oh, AP, I think this is the only program extant that has your sexual fantasies in it. We might make 1 million off of this one. That is a great poem, a great poem. So I think you were honored by Hillary, weren't you, when you met
Mm,
her? Because I know you were a big deal, and I'm going to tell everybody about it.
I
You
don't think so.
you
That was an
entered
honor.
you entered the National Endowment for the Arts as the head of, as I remembered, expansion art.
Expansion Arts.
Yeah, and
Uh,
that was, tell us what that was.
well, Van Tyler Whitfield was the director of Expansion Arts when I went there. I first did a study on arts education, and then Nancy Hanks, a great director, a great chairman of the Arts Endowment, made me assistant director of Expansion Arts. And after a year or so, Van Tyler moved on, and I became the director of it. Expansion Arts was the program that was created to uh, reach arts organizations that were established in inner cities and in communities of color in rural areas and so forth. And it was a program that I was really happy to be involved in. For one thing, everything that was left of the Black Arts Movement was applying to it. So
Exactly.
I was able to support them. But it
Mm-hmm.
was also true, as I say, of the movements in other communities as well. So we were actually able to put together a great coalition of artists from all of these communities, and it was a more successful multiracial coalition than I think existed almost anywhere else. I can't think of anything to match it. It was very exciting because it showed you that there could be a certain democracy in art, and B, it also shows you the great diversity of imagery and sound and style that could be displayed in America based on arts in all of these communities. These were communities I used to describe as culture rich but institution poor.
Oh,
So the culture was there, but the institutions weren't there to sponsor the culture. And then that's what this program was designed to help. So
it
it was a
felt
real honor to run that program.
it felt so much like the Black arts movement, grassroots, grassroots. Find out where something is happening that nobody is supporting, and then support that. And then after 30 or 35 years, I think you became deputy director of the National Endowment for the Arts.
Yeah, I was deputy chairman I was the deputy chairman. I was director of expansion arts for about 15 years. And the last 15 years at the endowment, I was deputy chairman.
Did you enjoy it?
No, it wasn't like being program director. You move up, the jobs get more boring, you know. But
Yeah.
and as director of expansion arts, I had my hands in all of these communities and all these organizations. I was able. It was always stimulating. But as deputy chairman, I mean, you deal with procedure.
Yeah, but you can do some good.
Oh yeah, it was good work. It was good work, but
I
the
know.
job wasn't as much fun.
I used to see you in the elevator. I was with NEH.
That's
You were
right.
on the sixth floor. I was on the fifth floor.
Right.
And we, we slugged it out in
Right.
the bureaucracy.
Yeah.
But first and foremost, you're a poet that we love and adore. And let us have a final poem.
Final poem.
Not final
Uh,
for our lives, just for
okay.
this podcast.
Well, I will do. I will do After Vallejo, a poem after the great Peruvian poet Cesar Vallejo, who I know you love as well. He wrote a poem that began, I will die in Paris on a rainy day, a day I
Mm.
already remember, or something like that. Um, After Vallejo, I will die in Havana in a hurricane. It will be morning. I'll be facing southwest, away from the Gulf, away from the storm, away from home, looking toward the virid hills of Matanzas where the Orisha rise, lifted by congueros in masks of iron, bongoceros in masks of water, timbaleros in masks of fire, by all the clave that binds the rhythms of this world. I'll be writing as I go, revising another hopeful survey of my life. I will die of nothing that I did, but of all that I did not do. I promised myself a better self than I could make, and I will not forgive. You will be there, complaining that I never saved you, that I
Mm.
left you where you live, stranded in your own green dream. When you come for me, come singing, no dirge, but scat my eulogy in bebop code.
Hmm.
Sing that I died among gods, but lived with no God and did not suffer for it. Find one true poem that I made and sing it to my shade as it fades into the wind. Sing it presto in 4/4 time in the universal ghetto key of B flat. I will die in Havana in rhythm.
Mm.
Tumbayo, Montuno, Guaguanco, dense strata of rhythm pulsing me away. And the mother of waters will say to the saint of crossroads, well, damn, he danced his way out after all.
The voice of A.B. Spellman in your own green dream. And this is the poet and the poem from the Library of Congress. We're on remote. The program is produced by Forest Woods Media Production, post production by Mike Turpin, MET Studios. We wish to thank the Library of Congress for making the program possible. Funding is provided by the Sinipit Fund, Ravada Foundation, Natalie Canavore, Sandy Jackson Cohen. Mike Turpin is our engineer, and I'm Grace Cavalieri. Thank you.